There was a time when doing nothing was perfectly acceptable. In fact, some days doing nothing was pretty much the plan, right? I have an old picture of me and some friends on a Saturday, no particular Saturday, and I want you to take a look at it. Really look at what they're doing. Nothing. We're doing absolutely nothing. One of us is sitting on the porch, somebody's standing in the doorway, somebody else is leaning against the railing. That's it. Apparently, this was a Saturday. Nobody looks particularly concerned that we don't have anything to do at that moment. Nobody is trying to figure out where we're going next. We're just there. And somebody actually thought this moment was worth taking a picture of. So you see, it's not Christmas, it's not a vacation, not some big event. Just Saturday. Back then, if you were sitting around the house long enough, eventually you'd make the mistake of announcing it. I'm bored. Now, telling your parents you were bored was a little bit risky, right? Because your mother wasn't going to sit down beside you and say, "Well, Johnny, let's explore some activities that might stimulate you." No. She'd say, "Go outside," or "Read a book. And if you pushed your luck, I got plenty for you to do." And then suddenly, miraculously, you weren't bored anymore. You were cured. Because apparently there was a whole list of chores sitting somewhere that only became active when a child complained about having nothing to do. So we learned pretty quickly that boredom was our problem. And we figured it out. We went outside, we rode our bikes, all the stuff you do. We knocked on somebody's door to see if they wanted to come out. And sometimes they'd ask, "What are we going to do?" I don't know. That was the entire plan. And somehow, it was enough. And maybe all of that sounds like wasted time now. I'm not so sure that it was. Because when there wasn't something constantly available to entertain us, well, our minds had to participate, didn't they? If you were bored long enough, eventually your imagination kicked in. Sometimes we didn't figure it out. Sometimes we really did just sit there. We'd wander into the kitchen, open the refrigerator, stare at everything for a while, close it. Then come back in 5 minutes later to see if anything new had arrived. We read cereal boxes. Tell me you didn't read cereal boxes if you're from the era that I'm talking about. Not because we were particularly interested in riboflavin. It was just something we hadn't read in a while. And maybe all of that sounds like wasted time now. I'm not so sure that it was. Because when there wasn't something constantly available to entertain us, well, our minds had to participate, didn't they? If you were bored long enough, eventually your imagination kicked in. A cardboard box could become almost anything. A fort, a spaceship, a race car, a secret hideout. Until your mother decided it had been in the living room too long, and suddenly it became what it had apparently been all along. Garbage. Hey, we made things up. We invented games with rules that changed depending on who was losing. Oh sure, we played all the traditional stuff. Capture the flag and release and hide and seek. All the standard stuff. But we made our own stuff up too. We took things apart. Sometimes we even got them back together. And we read. Now, I don't mean everybody was sitting around reading great literature. Let's not rewrite history here. If there was something good on TV, I was probably watching it. You probably were too. But reading was a much bigger part of filling those empty spaces, don't you think? Books, magazines, comics, newspapers. My favorite was Mad Magazine. And reading required something of you. The writer could describe an old house at the end of the road, but the writer couldn't actually show it to you. You had to build it. You decided what it looked like. You gave the characters faces, You heard the voices. You created the rooms they walked into. Two people could read the exact same book and see two completely different worlds. The movie was happening inside your head. And there was something else happening during all those hours when nobody was entertaining us. We thought. That's such a simple thing to say that it almost sounds ridiculous, right? Of course we still think. But I mean, those long stretches when your mind had nowhere in particular that it was supposed to go. You'd lie in bed and think. You'd sit on a porch and think. You'd ride in the backseat of a car and stare out the window. There was no screen mounted 6 inches from your face. You watched houses go by, telephone poles, people in other cars, and eventually your mind wandered somewhere. Maybe you replayed something that happened at school. Or maybe you imagined what your life would be like someday. Maybe you invented some completely ridiculous scenario where you saved the entire school from a burning building and everybody finally realized how amazing you were. Not that I ever did that. But hey, everybody daydreams. And nobody seemed particularly concerned about it. There were also things we simply had to wait for. And we weren't very good at waiting either. It just happened to be required. Your favorite television show came on once a week. And if you missed it, well, you missed it. There was no button that said start from the beginning. There wasn't another episode waiting immediately afterward. You waited until next week, just like everybody else. If a movie left the theater, it might be a very long time before you saw it again. If you wanted an album, you saved your money and you went to buy it. And when you bought it, you listened to the whole thing. Even the songs you didn't like. You paid for 12 songs, you're getting 12 songs. We waited for Christmas. We waited for birthdays. We waited for Friday night. We waited for summer. And those things seemed enormous when they finally arrived, didn't they? Maybe part of what made them special was how long we'd been thinking about them. Anticipation had time to build. And maybe because we waited for things, when they finally did happen, they didn't always need to be enormous to feel important. I have another old photograph. This one is actually an event. It's a birthday party from one of my sisters. Well, you can see there's a cake on the table. A few of us are gathered around it. My dad, my sisters. There's some food. My mom's probably taking the picture. That's pretty much the production. Nobody appears particularly worried about posing for the perfect picture. Somebody isn't even looking at the camera, except me. We're just having a birthday, and it was enough, right? That's something I notice when I look at those old photographs. We certainly took pictures back then, but usually somebody pulled out the camera, took one or two, and then put it away. The picture came from the experience. The experience wasn't created for the picture. Even people made you wait. You called somebody's house and what happened? Nobody answered. That was it. The investigation was over. They weren't home. You didn't send a text. You didn't check whether they'd seen it. You didn't notice that they were online 17 minutes ago and began wondering why they were apparently avoiding you. They weren't home. Try again later. And somehow, civilization continued. Well, there were fewer choices, too. Television is probably the easiest example. We had a handful of channels, and sometimes there really wasn't anything good on. So eventually, you picked the least objectionable thing and watched it. Of course, if Dad was in the room, it was whatever Dad wanted to watch. Stand in line for 30 seconds? Phone. Waiting for somebody? Phone. Commercial comes on? Phone. Sit down on the couch and nothing happens for approximately 11 seconds? Well, obviously something has gone terribly wrong. Better check the phone. Maybe that's what I've been thinking about. Technology has given us some really extraordinary things. I wouldn't seriously want to give most of them back, would you? I like having practically every song ever recorded available whenever I want it. I like being able to find an answer to almost any question in just seconds. I like being able to reach people. I like taking pictures without wondering whether I have 4 exposures left. This isn't about pretending everything was better before technology. It wasn't really. But whenever human beings gain something, I think it's worth occasionally asking whether we quietly gave something up in exchange. Because boredom used to make us find something to do. Waiting taught us anticipation. Reading made us build worlds inside our heads. Empty time allowed our thoughts to wander. And when something special finally happened, there wasn't always another little screen competing for our attention. We were just there. Maybe that's what doing nothing really was. It looked like nothing from the outside. A kid lying on the floor, someone staring through a car window, a person sitting quietly with a book, a few friends sitting on a porch on a Saturday with absolutely no idea what they were going to do next. But inside our heads, quite a lot was happening. And I wonder sometimes whether we become so good at eliminating boredom that we've also eliminated some of the places where imagination used to live. Maybe we don't need to throw our phones away. Maybe we don't need to go backwards at all. Maybe every once in a while, we just need to be bored again and see where our minds decide to go.